Hi there guys, and welcome to another video. Now for those of you who follow my channel, you may have seen when I made this backup server here, a 13th gen Intel with 32 gigs of RAM. Well, since making this server, I've actually made another, and that's this server here. But to make this server, I didn't even need to pick up a screwdriver in my hand or anything, I did it all from my keyboard. And no, I don't mean a keyboard like that, I mean my computer keyboard. So a clue about how I did that, if we look in the top right hand corner here, it says Datacenter server. And if we look at the hardware here, it's an i7-7700. Yeah, not the fastest CPU, 4 cores, 8 threads, a pass mark of 8653, but this CPU was first seen 8 years ago in Q4 of 2016. The max amount of RAM this CPU can support is 64 gigs, and there's 64 gigs installed in this server, so that's pretty cool. Now the model name, just ignore that, that's because I've named it myself through Unraid, but the motherboard underneath is a Fujitsu D3401H2. Now I couldn't find much about this, I did find this on Geekbench here, a system with the same motherboard, CPU and RAM. This Fujitsu motherboard is designed for use really in desktops and workstations. It's part of the Fujitsu Extended Lifestyle series, which supports 6th and 7th gen Intel, the Skylake and Kaby Lake series. But really, who cares about the motherboard, hey? So looking at the storage here, I've got this 6TB SATA hard drive here, along with two 512 gig NVMe SSDs. Now, sorry to talk about the motherboard again, but if you noticed on the motherboard it only had one NVMe slot, so one has to assume that they're using a PCIe adapter to get the second NVMe in here. So anyway, why am I showing you my server in the data center? Well, basically because I want to show you it's not really expensive to have a server in the data center, and it's really actually quite easy to set up Unraid there. So what this video is going to be about is going to show you how you can really easily set up Unraid in a data center in 10 minutes or less. Now, yes, that's a bold claim. So the first thing you're going to need is you're going to need to rent a server. I went and got one from Hetzner. I found their prices really reasonable. Now, I just want to say that this video is not in any way sponsored by Hetzner at all. They're just the host that I chose for making this video. For example, just doing a quick search for cheap dedicated server, at the top here we can see OVH Cloud, and well, if we scroll down, they've got a server here, 32 gigs of RAM, an i3-1231 V3 CPU, which is 4 cores 8 threads, and wow, 4 2TB hard drives, and that's for £16 a month. So in US dollars, about $20 a month, with an unmetered 100 meg connection. If I click configure here, it will tell me where the data center is, where the server is located. And if we look where the server is, we can see this is located in Canada. So basically you can see if you look around, you can find cheap dedicated servers. And it doesn't matter which host you choose, except for one really important thing. They must allow you to have a USB stick plugged into your server. Without that, Unraid won't boot. So that's the only stipulation we must have. So this host here, OVH Cloud, I've no idea if they support that or not. I've never used them myself, and I did actually try and call them and find out, but it was impossible to speak to a human being, and I couldn't find out if they support that or not. So yeah, if you do decide to go with this company here, then please find out first if they support USB flash drives to be connected to the servers. If they do, then let us all know. Tell us in the comments below, because they do have some really competitive pricing, it seems. In fact, if any of you guys out there know of any hosts where they're reasonably priced and we can use a USB stick with the server, again, please put it in the comments. Like I said earlier, I chose Hetzner for my dedicated server. You can add a USB flash drive to any of their servers. Hetzner's data centers are located in Europe. They have really good English speaking support, and so far I can't fault them, they've been really good. I use their server auction, which is where they sell some of their older hardware. You can see here for €29 a month, you get 64 gigs of RAM, a Skylake processor, and two 250 gig hard drives. Now for an Unraid server, I wanted a little bit more than that. So what I did is I came down here and I said I wanted a minimum of 3 drives and I wanted to have a drive of at least say 4 terabytes. So you can see here for €36 a month, that's about $36, you can get 2 SSDs and a 4 terabyte hard drive. Now what I actually went for myself, I bought this server, an i7-7700, 6 terabytes, 2 512 gig NVMe's and 64 gigs of RAM. The data center it's in is in Finland, and I got mine for around €39 a month. Now the deals that you can find here change all the time, but one good thing about all of their servers is you get unlimited bandwidth. So anyway, before I start, you can see that my server's already set up. So what I'm going to do is I want to actually take a backup of this server, because in this video I'm going to show you as well how we can easily restore from a flash backup should anything go wrong with our server and we need to restore it. So whilst this backup is being created, let's go back to the Hetzner server page again, and I'm just going to show you here there's other servers you can get with more modern hardware from €39 a month. This one here has got like an i5-13500, a 14-core CPU with 64 gigs of RAM and 2 SSDs. But for me, I'd rather pay a little bit less, have an older CPU and have a spinning Rust hard drive as well for some bulk storage. Now obviously, as I said earlier, there's something extra we're going to need. We're going to need our USB flash drive. So I'll come to that, how to actually order that in a moment. So now obviously, as I've already bought a server, I'm going to log now into the control panel. So to do that, I'm just going to click onto here and I'm going to choose the robot option here. And once here, clicking on server on the side, it shows a list of whatever servers you've got. And there's mine there. We can see the data center it's in and also its IP addresses, but obviously I've blurred them out. So I'm going to click onto my server here, and we can see along this tab here, there's various things that we can do. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to click onto hardware here, and this is where we see the hardware that we've got in our server. And next to that we can see add-ons, and you can see here I've got a 16 gig USB stick, and to order that, when you buy one of their auction servers, you have to order it after you've actually made the purchase. You just come across here to support and open up a ticket here and ask them for their 16 gig USB stick, and it's about $1.40 I think a month, so it works out about $15 a year to have the USB stick. So you just send them the message, and to be honest, I had a USB stick in my server within 15 minutes. So once you've got your server all set up, what we need to do is come across here to where it says rescue. Now when you have a new server, the rescue system will be activated by default. This is basically a minimalist operating system based off Debian, I think, that boots over the network whenever you click activate rescue system. So it's really nice. Anytime you need to do any work on your system, you can activate the rescue system. It gives you an SSH password here. So I'm going to copy that and just paste it into Notepad here. So once the rescue system's been activated, we should come across here to reset and click on to execute an automatic hardware reset. And this will reboot the server and it will boot back into the rescue system. Now we need to give it a minute or two to reboot. And then we can just open up a terminal window as we're going to need to SSH in. So I'm going to type SSH root at and then the IP address of my server. Now obviously I'm going to blur this out. And then I just need to add the password that was generated for this SSH session earlier. And you can see we're straight into the rescue system. Now the rescue system, you can actually install other images as well. Running the install image, you can install things like Ubuntu, Debian, and that kind of thing onto the server if that's what you wanted to do, but we're not here for that, we're here to install Unraid. Okay, so let's clear the screen here. And one thing I'm going to mention is if you're installing this and your data center doesn't have a rescue system like this, just install either Debian or Ubuntu onto your server first, because the script that I've made that will install Unraid that we're going to use will run on either. But I don't need to do that because the Hetzner rescue system is based off Debian. So what we need to do now is go over to my GitHub, so do a search for GitHub space Invader1, click onto repositories, and you're looking for the Datacenter Unraid installer. Click onto that. And here we've got the instructions of how to use it. So it's really simple to use. The first thing we need to do is just copy this command here. So that's copied onto the clipboard. So opening up a terminal window, I'm going to paste the command in there. And what this does is it downloads the script and makes it executable. So the next thing we need to do is basically run the script. Now, if you're logged into a rescue system, you'll be logged in as root, and so you won't have sudo installed. So this will be the command that we need here. Now, if you're logged into a Ubuntu system, then you're probably going to need to run sudo bash to run the script with elevated privileges. So let's go back to the terminal window and paste that in. Okay, so first it checks for the necessary dependencies. They're all there. And now we're into the Unraid Flash Creator. So we've got three options here. We can choose an Unraid branch. We've got stable, which I recommend you installing stable, not next. We've got next, which is kind of RC versions when they're available. And the bottom option here is to upload and restore from a backup. So that's why I took my backup earlier, because I want to better do that. After wiping this server clean with a fresh install of Unraid, I can come back here and then I can restore. So anyway, we're going to go for the stable version here. So I'm going to enter 1. And then the script will look and see which are the latest versions available. And as of making this video, the latest stable version is 6.12.10. So I'm going to select 1 because I want that one. So we can see I've chosen 6.12.10. And now it's asking which flash drive that I want to install it on. Obviously, this server's only got one flash drive in, so there's only one listed here. If you had multiple flash drives, they'll all be listed here, and just make sure you install it on the correct one. So I'm going to just type 1 here, and then we get a warning saying that all the data will be wiped and erased, and whether we want to continue or not. So yes, obviously I want to continue. And so now it's wiping the drive, formatting it correctly, downloading Unraid. It's completed, it's extracting it now, and now it's going to copy the files over to the flash drive. And now we'll see here that it's ready to make the drive bootable. Now we can see here it's telling me how my server's currently booted. So my server's currently booted in legacy mode, so I don't know if this server will actually be able to boot in EFI mode. So here I'm not going to permit UEFI boot. I'm just going to put no for here. But if you saw here it said that you were booted in UEFI, then you'd want to permit UEFI boot, as that's how your server would be expecting to boot. Anyway, because I'm in legacy mode at the moment, I'm going to choose no. Okay, and so Unraid is all installed on my flash drive in the data center. Nothing else to do. We can close this window now. Let's go back to the Hetzner page, and I'm going to go back to reset here. And now I'm going to execute another hardware reset for this to better boot up onto the Unraid flash drive. Now there's one caveat here, is your server may not be automatically set to boot from the flash drive. I found mine was, and I didn't need to do anything. But if yours isn't, you could contact the data center through a support ticket and ask them if they can set that for you. Or what you can do is you can rent a KVM. There's no cost, I believe, up to an hour. You just book it in and then you can use a KVM over the internet, and you can adjust the BIOS settings yourself and set the boot order that way. Like I said, I didn't have to do it. It was already set to boot from a flash drive. So let's reboot. I'm going to send the command. So whilst it's rebooting now, we want to go across here to the firewall. And here on the firewall, you can see my incoming rules here. At the moment, I've only got SSH allowed. Now, when you first buy your server, everything's open. I just applied an SSH template here for me to be able to connect by SSH. But what we're going to need to do is connect to, obviously, the Unraid web GUI, which runs on port 80. So I'm going to add a rule here. I'm just going to call it 80 and set for IPv4, TCP, port 80, and we're going to have that accepted. So what this will do is allow us to log into the Unraid server's web GUI from the IP address of the server. Now, I'm only going to leave this open for a little time. If you wanted to at home, if you had a static IP address, you could just put your IP address in here, and then that would be the only IP address allowed to connect to this port. I'm going to delete this shortly because I'll be installing Tailscale on my server. But for now, we need to be able to get in via port 80 for the initial setup. So I'm going to scroll down and click on to save. So this takes about 30 seconds to a minute for the firewall rules to be applied. Okay, and we can see that's been successful. So what I'm going to do now is copy my IP address. Again, it's blurred, but just copy your IP address by clicking on the button here. And I'm going to open up a new tab and I'm going to paste the IP address into the tab. Okay, so here we are. Unraid is running in the data center. And yes, getting it running took under 10 minutes. Yeah, I know what you're going to say. Actually buying the server and going through that probably takes longer, but the actual setup, 10 minutes to get to this part. So as this is a fresh install of Unraid, it's asking me to create a password, which I'm going to do now. Now, if you're going to leave your server exposed with port 80, I advise not to, but if you do, then make sure you do a really complex password because it will be exposed to the internet. So for now, I'm going to start the 30-day free trial and register the license later. Okay, so I'm going to confirm this. And so here's my lovely Unraid server in the data center. So now to choose what to do with the drives. So we've got these drives here, 6 terabyte and 2 512s. Now what I'm going to do personally is I'm going to not have any parity. Well, I don't have enough hard drives really anyway for that in the array. So I'm going to set this drive here as just disk 1. But what I want to do, personally, I want to have this as ZFS and I'm going to have it as ZFS encrypted. I want all my drives encrypted, especially as they're in the data center. If a drive goes wrong or I ever kind of walk away from this server, I don't really have to worry about the data because it's going to be encrypted. Also, I'm going to put compression on. ZFS with compression is going to get me a little bit more out of that 6 terabytes than if I didn't have the compression on. So I'm going to click apply and done. So I don't need to have so many slots here. It's just a little bit confusing. Let's pop that down to 3. Now I'm going to add 2 pull devices. I could go ahead and make a mirror, but what I want to do is I'm going to have one of those NVMEs for Docker and one for VMs. So the first pull, yeah, it can be called cache, and I will add that and choose the first NVMe. Again, ZFS and ZFS encrypted with compression. And the second pull, let's just call this VMs, and the second NVMe there. File system type, of course, ZFS. Compression on, and let's click apply. Right, so all the drives are going to be encrypted. So I'm going to put in my encryption passphrase here. So let's start up the Unraid array and format the drives. Right, so the server's all up and running. If we look at the dashboard here, good thing to see, all the drives passed the smart test. That's pretty cool. It'd be interesting, I reckon, to see how much use these drives have had. This 6 terabyte, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like really, really old. So it's a 4-year-old drive. It's pretty old. It's had a lot of wear. But if it goes wrong, they'll replace it, so not really too much of a worry, I guess. And let's have a look at the NVMEs. And this one here is 2 years, 9 months, so not quite as old. And let's have a look at this one here. Oh, this one's pretty new. That's quite nice, 5 months old. So I'd imagine this one had a failure at some point and they had to swap it for a new drive. Okay, so I'm going to go to settings now and have a look at the network settings. So the IP address of the server is the WAN IP address that the host has given me. Now bridging is enabled here, but because we only have one IP address and nothing else that can be given out to the server, then bridging can actually be a bit of a problem. And to look at that, let's go across to the VM manager here and go to the advanced mode. Now we can see here the default network source is BR0. So this is the bridge on that default IP address that we've got. Normally this would be fine because it would be coming from our router and we'd just be given another IP on DHCP. But because in the data center they only give you one IP, well, you're not going to get any other IP addresses. So for our VMs, we want to change the default network to VIR BR0. This is basically an internal network that QEMU creates. So then when we create a VM using this, we just get an internal IP address, and if we need to connect to the internet from the VM, That works because it's natted with the main IP address of the Unraid server, which is our WAN IP. So by changing this, I can run VMs easily on the Datacenter Unraid server. Now for Docker, we don't actually need to change anything. If we look here, the custom Docker network type is IP VLAN, that's absolutely fine. So nothing to change here, but let's actually customize the server now. I definitely don't want the name of tower, I need something cooler than that. So I'm going to stop the array here, go to settings, and where is it? Identification, and call it something a bit more cooler. What to call it though? Well, the description can be data center server. So as I've been watching recently Andromeda, I'm going to call a server that. And I know you guys who know more about Andromeda than me will say that's not the name of the ship, it should be called Andromeda Ascendant, but that's too long. I'm going to call it just Andromeda. Okay, so with the server name changed, I can start back up the array. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to install is going to be Tailscale. First, let's get the CA plugin in. And I like the actual plugin as opposed to the container. Now there's a proper tutorial coming about setting up Tailscale pretty soon, but basically it's really easy. You just sign into Tailscale and it adds to the machine with its own IP address. Okay, so I'm successfully joined. Okay, so there's just one thing I'm going to do, go to settings here and then across to advanced settings. And I'm going to enable use Tailscale DNS settings here. Okay, so there's my Tailscale IP. I'm going to copy that and now paste that in. So now I can actually unblur my IP address because we're now logging in on that Tailscale one. Okay, so log back in. So now because we've got this new IP, I can go back now to the Hetzner firewall here and I can disable the rule where we were forwarding port 80. So I'm just going to delete the rule because we don't need it anymore. And with that done, the server's nice and secure. So that's an Unraid server all set up in the data center. Now, yep, there's nothing on it at the moment, no VMs, no containers. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point in having an Unraid server in the data center? Well, you could set up a seed box, you could run Jellyfinplex or Emby from there. It can be a backup location. And something I'm going to do, I'm going to set up something called AirSats TV. What's that, you might ask? Well, basically the easiest way to explain it is it kind of lets you have your own TV channel. Now, I own all of the Stargate series, Atlantis, SG-1, etc. and I've ripped all of those discs onto my server at home. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload that series onto the data center server. Once I've uploaded it there, I'm going to configure the AirSats TV to give me a dedicated TV channel, my own personal one, that just plays random episodes of Stargate. So it's different to kind of Plex and Emby because I'm not actually choosing what episode I play, and it's just running all of the time. I might turn it on, I don't know, on a Wednesday evening and it will already be halfway through an episode. And as time goes on, I might put different sci-fi shows on there as well, but that's something I thought would be quite cool to do. And because it's not running on my own server at home, it's not wearing down my hard drives and it's not costing me any electricity. Anyway, if you guys can think of anything you want me to actually try out on the data center server, or you got any good ideas what I can use it for, then please let me know in the comments below. Now, before we wrap up, let's just have a look at restoring a backup of the Unraid flash drive onto the data center server. Okay, so what happens if the flash drive fails in the data center and we need to restore from a flash backup? Well, that's what we're going to look at now. So obviously, if the flash backup fails, well, we're going to have to restore it. But how do we easily get our flash backup image across onto the server? Well, that's pretty easy. What we need to do is we are going to need a Dropbox account. Now, I'm sorry, this is the only cloud service that I've put into the system at the moment. The reason being is it's a lot easier to convert a Dropbox link into a direct download link than it is from something like Google Drive. Google Drive requires a special package called gdown, which you can't actually install into a rescue system because it's managed by the host. But with Dropbox you can sign up for a free 2 GB account, which is fine for what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload my flash drive backup. And once it's uploaded, you'll get a window like this saying it's too big to load. That doesn't matter. All it means is it can't preview it in a preview window. We don't care about that. So what we need to do now is we need to make a shareable link for this file. So to do that, I'm going to click onto share here. And by default, anyone with the link can view the file. So I'm going to click create and copy link. And so the link is now copied onto my clipboard. So it's time for Notepad again. And I'm going to paste that here. So we've got the URL of our Unraid flash drive backup. So now let's go back across to the Hetzner control panel, and it's time to boot into the rescue system again. So let's activate that. And we've got a new SSH password, so let's pop that back into Notepad. And now let's reset and boot into the rescue system. Okay, so I'm logged back into the rescue system through SSH now. And again, I'm going to go back to GitHub, copy the command to download the script, and run the script again. So this time I'm going to choose 9 to upload and restore from backup. Now here it's going to ask us how we want to provide the backup file link. I uploaded to Dropbox, so I'm going to choose 1, but we could enter a direct URL. If you've got any other way of uploading a zip file where it's a direct download, then you could choose the second option. But much easier to use Dropbox, so I'm going to choose 1. So now it's asking for the public link. So let's go to Notepad and copy the link and paste it in. So what you can see is it validated the link and it's converted it into a direct download link. So now again, as before, we just select the flash drive. And yes, we know we're going to overwrite it. And again, it's wiping all the data. It's downloading our backup from Dropbox. Okay, so it's completed the download. Now it's going to copy everything to the flash drive and make it bootable just as before. Again, I'm going to select no here. And the flash drive's now restored and I can reboot back into Unraid. Now, before I forget, I don't want to leave the file here, so I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to go into deleted files and I'm going to permanently delete that. Okay, so it's no longer in Dropbox, so that's cool. So let's reboot the server. So there we are, straight in. And let's log in. And as my drives are encrypted, as expected, the array hasn't started up yet. But there we are, straight into the restored server. Awesome. Okay guys, well that wraps things up and brings us to the end of the video. Now I really hope you enjoyed this video and you found it interesting, a little bit different setting up Unraid in the data center. And if you want to watch something a little bit different again, well, I've just uploaded another video at the same time as this one, where with a laser cutter, I build a Death Star wall in my studio office. So if that interests you, check that out as well. So thanks very much everyone for watching. I'd really appreciate you hitting the like button if you like the video. Thanks very much if you could do that. And if you're not already a subscriber of the channel, then please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Now I want to give a really big thank you to all of my patrons and supporters out there. Thank you so much guys for all of your support. I really wouldn't be able to make these videos if it wasn't for you guys. And if you want to join these great bunch of people and help support the channel, then please see the links in the description below. Anyway guys, it's getting late here and it's time for me to go, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.